I cannot stress how important the work that FSA is doing, because it is being that bridge builder. It is a bridge building foundation. More than anything else, what it does is to create dialogue. That's my experience of working in FSA, that all it's about is creating a space where artists can speak, where academics can question and be questioned, where institutions and the local community can actually experience spirituality from artists who are unapologetic in their faith. They don't get a chance to see that in museums. They don't get to see that in museums in Charleston or in galleries around Charleston. There's a lot of artists who openly have discussions with other artists about their faith, but they've nowhere to show it and nowhere to see it and nowhere to experience it. The Foundation for Spirituality in the Arts, it brings all the communities together in one space. That is a very unique foundation. It's one of its kind in America. It's not even in the UK. So it's globally one of a kind. So this is the reason why I say I cannot state the gravity of how important the work that FSA is doing. No one is doing it. No one. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for FSA and what it will bring for the future of contemporary art. And when I go back to London, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement because a lot of my artist friends realise that this is not happening in the UK. They recognise that it needs to happen. There needs to be a kind of a foundation, or wants to be that bridge builder between sanctuary and contemporary art.
I mean, how would you describe your artistic practice?
How to describe my artistic practice? I described it first as my first medium is research. So I go into every project with research in mind. So I'm just archiving different histories, different myths, different narratives. And I'm unsure about what medium is going to be appropriate. And so that's why my arts practice has kind of gone from making video documentary or drawings or installations or curating. It's I find out which is the most appropriate medium for the project that I've been tasked to deliver. So I go into each one with that in mind. First of all, the spiritual side of it is the engine, because I don't differentiate between my spiritual practice and my arts practice and my lived practice. They're all just one and the same. And I use my spiritual practice as the engine to keep my life going, and from then it helps me to sort of focus on what's important rather than get sidetracked, because we all can get sidetracked and distracted. So I've got how my spiritual practice works is it helps me stay on the path in a disciplined, consistent manner. And because of that, that's my anchor. And I use it that way. It's as part of my Buddhist practice, if that makes any sense. If I was to break it down, when it comes to working in sanctuary, in place of sanctuary, then that's when my spirituality comes out even more to the fore. When I have worked in places like Kensington Palace, which it wasn't a religious brief. It had nothing to do with religion, in a sense. It was about history and about that space. Then my spiritual practice then comes into how I'm preparing for the work to be made. But when it comes to a sanctuary, then it comes right forward, because that becomes an issue of trust with the people I'm working with, because I'm working a lot of the time in Christian spaces, in contemporary Christian spaces, with contemporary Christianity, which has a lot of layers going on and a lot of conflict and challenges. And so it has to come right forward, because I've got to make sure that none of my stuff gets in the way. None of my personal myths, narratives, ideologies, anything like that gets in the way. I've got a brief to fulfill, and I've got to support somebody else's faith. So that's when my faith comes right forward, if I'm making any sense then.
It's a Buddhist sort of lack of ego, almost, in a way, right?
Yeah. I think we have to put our hands up. We've all got a little bit of ego going on, and it's how we keep it in check and how we move that ego in a way that is actually creating value. We can, that saying, can always turn poison into medicine. I have to be mindful that I don't bring my own stuff in, because I have to. My first job when I'm working on a project which involves sanctuary is all about trust building. It's that famous St. Francis of Assisi quote and I kind of, even as a Buddhist, I keep this in my head. He said, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. So I have to, if I'm the bridge builder, I have to show it. And that's when my spirituality, my faith comes forward, because otherwise no one's going to trust you. And so I cannot let my ego get in the way, because that's when I don't trust myself. When I made the Stations of the Cross for Gloucester Cathedral, and I actually went into that by accident, really. I'm really into graphic novels, especially independent American and Canadian graphic novels. And I remember making this work and a carving, which was based on, it was just a comic. So it had this sequential thing, had about 12 blocks, coloured blocks, and it was an artist friend of mine who is a lapsed Irish Catholic, and he said, that reminds me of the Stations of the Cross. Now, being a Buddhist British Jamaican, I have no idea about Stations of the Cross, even though in Jamaica we have more churches per capita than anywhere else on the planet, even more than Charleston. If you can imagine that. I still not have heard of the Station of the Cross. I don't come from a Catholic tradition. So I was intrigued by that, and again I started researching it, and then I realised the Stations of the Cross is an original comic. It's the medieval original comic. I'm going to make my own Stations of the Cross, but I need somewhere to exhibit it, and it seems that the most appropriate place must be in a church. So a friend from the Arts Council England, he suggested he had a contact in Gloucester Cathedral in the UK. And I don't know if you know Harry Potter films, when they're running down the corridor and it's the cloisters above head, that's where it's shot. So the cloisters are where the monks wrote the illustrated manuscripts. So I had to kind of give him a pitch, and so he can essentially give me the gig. And I had to pitch it, and I thought about it, what would be interesting for me, and what would be interesting for them, what would be interesting for the audience. And so my pitch was, I'm a practicing Buddhist, I'm British Jamaican, and I would like to make the Stations of the Cross accessible to atheists. So because that intrigued the very reverend, he was the Dean of Gloucester Cathedral, and the Gloucester Cathedral is a 10th century cathedral, but it goes out of its way to do programs of contemporary art a lot. So it's in their program. And he was intrigued by that so much that he said, yes, I would like to see them in the cloisters for Lent the following year. So again, I go back into research, because I only knew the surface of what the Stations of the Cross meant. I saw it as essentially a comic. And then I had to research its meaning, how its traditions have changed from time to time, how the French depict it, how the Germans depict it, how the Italians depict it, how the English depicted it, how the Africans have depicted it. To watch every God film known to man, every single one of them. But my kind of epiphany realization about the importance of working in sanctuary is when it was actually first exhibited, because still for me it was just almost like an academic exercise. I was reimagining the Stations of the Cross and making it accessible to people who do not even like religion. I was making it for atheists. So I had to find a way that would attract someone who does not believe, who makes them kind of question, that looks really interesting. I never thought how important the Stations of the Cross is just for the human condition. So that's the way I was finding ways I could use the messaging of the traditional stations, but make it accessible to someone who has no idea. You know, I was kind of almost making it for myself as well, because I'm not from that tradition. So when it was first exhibited at Gloucester, I remember two distinct experiences. When the Dean was giving liturgy to each station, and I've never seen this before. It's the first time I've witnessed it, and how much power he gave all these artworks. And for me, I knew what it was. It's just pigment and wood, and a lot of hard work and tears and blood, sweat and tears, and a lot of research. But I never saw these images as power. I just never saw them as a powerful mirror of faith. That's all I saw them as. And it's witnessing, when you witness someone crying in front of your art, that's when I started to realise I've missed I've missed something here. I didn't realise how important this is. And when what started me off on my journey was actually a young mother with a pram, with a child, and she was crying in front of one particular station, and this station was the station where Jesus Christ dies on the cross, and it's like I did the Pieta scene. So, you know, in the Pieta in Rome, you know, Mary she could be 7 foot tall compared to a 5 foot tall Jesus across her lap. But you would see just sympathy. You empathise and you're compassionate towards her loss. And I thought, actually, a mother, if she saw her only son being dragged through the streets and being as an innocent and being subjected to humiliation like that and torture, I think she's going to be very angry. So I made her very, very angry and looking directly at the viewer, sort of almost challenging them. And she saw that, and that's what she was relating to. And, you know, she was with a young child. And I asked her about that. And he says, yeah, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian. I just came here as a tourist. I just saw that, and that's when I thought, I've created some value here. Maybe I should go down this route, and it might be an opportunity to do this again, because I've done my job as a bridge builder. Obviously, I didn't want to upset her. That's not my point. I didn't want to upset anybody, but my job as the artist bridge builder, it inspired me to actually explore more and see if there was another chance of doing it. And as musicians say, one good gig leads to another. So because of the success of that work, the narrative, here's a British Jamaican Buddhist making this Christian art in Gloucester Cathedral, and it was on TV, UK TV. So it got the interest and perked the interest of Bristol Diocese, and then they contacted me and said, there is a church that we'd like you to have a look at. And again, this was my first foray into not only faith again, but contested history. And that's when it becomes even multi-layered. You know, this church in particular in Bristol is a 13th century church. It is very similar history to Charleston, slave trading port. This particular church is the church that blessed every ship that left the port of Bristol. So all 2,500 slave ships that left Bristol, this is the church that every captain and second mate of their ship went into the church to have their final blessing for good trade and safe return. And that's the job of this harbour church, St Stephen's. It's actually the official home of the merchant venturers. And Colston, Edward Colston, that statue that was brought down and thrown into the river, thrown into the harbour of Bristol, which inspired all the copycat bringing down of statues in the US, Colston was the first one. He is a merchant venturer. And the mother church where they celebrated his birthday every year is at St Stephen's. So the church, the merchant venturers, wanted to reconcile the church's involvement in the slave trade. So because of the work that I did at Gloucester Cathedral, then they assigned me to replace the reredos. Now, I had to do a number of things. I had to support the community that uses the church. That's one community. Another community is a community of musicians that works there. It was their place of every Wednesday played in there. Another community of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous that use the space. So those are the communities that use that space already. And so I had to be mindful of that. And then the canon and myself had to do all these dialogue events that we would go to all the people that denounced the project in the first place, which were understandably, which is the black churches. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. The black community in Bristol didn't want to have anything to do with it. The white working class didn't want anything to do with it. We had to lobby politicians, which have different motives for different everything else. We had to have dialogues with the alternative, people who are atheists, who are spiritual, not religious, who didn't want anything to do with it. So more political alternative side. So we had all these dialogues and listened, and all we were doing was listening and taking notes and asking questions and listening. And listen to the merchant venturers who were having this discussion. Again, this is when I have to put my Buddhist practice first and be the bridge builder, and because they're seeing me as a lot of the time as the enemy, because I'm making this artwork for the Merchant Ventures Church, and we've got the audacity of calling it the reconciliation. So it was, again, a trust building exercise, listening a lot, and through a lot of research and everything else, then we created this work. And long story short of it, after 3 years of planning and 1 year of making within the church, all of those groups that I just outlined to you, it was a packed church, and it was at least 400 people in this packed church. And they all lit candles and put it on the altar. All these different communities that didn't like each other, didn't speak to each other, didn't want to have anything to do with the project, anything like this, it became their altarpiece, and it became the Bristol Reconciliation. So it was Bristol's Reconciliation. That was done created in 2011. And then in 2023, the UK government used that whole experience as the best case study for working with contested history and bringing people together, because they want to. So many statues and everything else, and roads need to be renamed and things like that. They wanted to support institutions up and down the country in the UK. The best practice in order to deal with it. So they used the Reconciliation Reredos. So it's now the Reconciliation Reredos in Bristol is seen as the best method to work with communities on like that. So I don't know if that answers the question. It's a long-winded answer.
No. That's good to have all of that context.
Yeah.
But, the thing that you were talking about, seeing your artwork in these spaces and the effect that it was having on people, not just in terms of this reconciliation between communities, but also just the personal impact that it had on people who may have been atheists or, outside a particular tradition. And I was wondering if you could just talk personally about, because there's always been this connection between art and the expression of faith, really, throughout history, if you look at the art historical record. But somehow, in the modern world, it has gotten written out. And you will often see museums and curators reluctant to address it, even though it might even be very apparent in an artist's work. And I was wondering if you could offer your own thoughts as to, why it's not emphasized anymore, and why it's important, this connection between art and spirituality.
That's a good one. There's a lot of resistance simply because we've gone through a long period of postmodernism. What it brought up was a culture of desecration. This kind of this thought about kind of what's the word when you break things and you're always kind of what's the word now? It's gone out of my head, but it's when you have to interrogate everything. It's been going on for so long. It's embedded within our curatorial culture, and so much so that it's awkward now for curators to talk about it. They have no reference point, no framework at all. What I found fascinating is, and I kind of realised this when I came here for the first time in 2023, and I started to realise that actually everyone talks about this secular and religion and secularization and sacred, that kind of thing. And I thought, actually, maybe there's no such thing as secular. Maybe it's just desecration. Maybe we've just been desecrating everything. Things that we now take for granted, experiences we take for granted. An obvious one, I'm from the UK, so I'm going to use football. You guys call it soccer, but at a football match, there's a ritual. All the players walk out together. They hold children's hands. They go to the centre of the pitch. These are rules and regulations. And then it becomes a ritual, a collective ritual for all these fans. Right? There's a ref in the middle that has to give rules and disciplines people when they get it wrong, when they foul and everything else. Everyone respects the referee. That is a ritual we just witnessed, but we take it for granted. We take it for granted when we. I have lots of musician friends who are very world-class jazz musicians, and I've often had discussions with them because I'm known to make album covers for jazz musicians, and I've often said this, that a lot of musicians do not realise that they're actually creating ceremony every time they play. They're bringing people together. They don't care about that's their sacred duty. Again, because of postmodernist thinking, which has kind of infiltrated everything in a way that we talk. It's on media, it's on academia, it's in art schools, it's everything like this. We don't see these experiences as sacred. We see them as secular, but actually they're sacred. When I'm doing the work that I'm doing, I find it fascinating that a lot of curators are very, very interested, but they don't want to admit it. But they are very interested in the process. They're very interested in why I decided to go down this route, but they would never want to exhibit it. But they just wanted to know, how have you decided to go on this route? I've had a lot of artists as well who have privately said to me, I couldn't do what you do because I wouldn't get support from curators or anything like that. I do think it's changing though. I do think since COVID, after COVID, I think that's when everyone got their wake-up call. They were looking at a mirror for 2 years, and they didn't like what they saw, and they found out that something was actually missing. They couldn't watch their football match. That ritual was taken away. They didn't realise that actually that was a sacred part. And so they wanted that back. The musicians didn't only realise that what they were doing actually was a sacred act, and because it was taken away. So I think COVID, the silver lining on the COVID experience was a lot. We were forced actually to look in the mirror, and that's why there's been a kind of re-examination of what is sacred now, and curators are they're finding it difficult to grasp. I think it's easier for them to grasp the symbolist and the abstract. They can grasp that. They can grasp a critique. They can easily grasp that. They can go, oh yeah, because that's part of deconstructing. They can grasp that side of it. They find it hard to grasp the unapologetic though. But even though, the irony I find is that they're almost religious-like in their denunciation. They don't realise that they're actually be more religious than everybody else. But I don't know if that makes any sense about what, haven't been really asked that question. But if we go on to my experience of the first residency when I was here, we had a lot of discussions. That residency was more about discussions than anything else. We were discussing these issues in a big way. I mean, Hassan and I were both from London, but we didn't meet in London. We met here, and when we started to relay to each other our experiences, we were saying, really, and when Lenicia, she was interested in the UK experience, and we're obviously interested in her experience. So we're, sharing notes about what is it like to be unapologetic in your faith, and what is it like when you went from an American point of view for Lenicia. We started to realise it's slightly easier to work in America than it is in the UK. Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Because,
like as a person of faith or as somebody who embraces
America's is not afraid of its faith and how important religion is. It's part of it's part of the lifeblood of the country, really. In the UK, because we've obviously everyone's separated church and state, but it's, well, let me say it a different way. The UK and France in particular, they're very used to seeing contemporary art in sanctuary, and that is, you could say you can blame the Second World War, because lots of churches were bombed, and so they had to reconstruct. So they went out of their way to make sure that modern artists were working in these spaces, to create new altarpieces, to create new art to go in there. In Europe, because of the Second World War, they had that reconstruction going on. America didn't have that reconstruction going on. I mean, in Charleston itself, everything's very preserved here, and they go out of their way to preserve it, which is brilliant. It's fantastic. So the challenge now for Charleston is to how do you create space for contemporary artists to reinterpret sanctuary, which will also kind of highlight the past, strengthen the present, makes more hopeful future, that kind of thing. UK was forced to do that, right, to the point where it's almost taking it for granted now. We don't have to talk about religion now because we've done all the deconstruction. We've put all the new art, modern art in churches. Let's go on a wave of kind of this secular route, and so we've had probably 2 generations, definitely I'd say 2 generations of deconstruction. Now, when we were kind of talking with Anissa, it's because faith is everyone talks about their relationship with God here. You know, you see an artist will talk about, I want to thank God, but you don't see that in the UK. That's the last thing you see in the UK. Someone say, I want to thank my God. It's like, really? We're not going to. You don't. That's the last thing you see exhibited. But it's encouraged in the US to say that. You know, again, probably Americans take that for granted, that every artist says, actually, I want to thank God. That relationship to my faith. You know, hardly hear that in the UK. And if it is, you're not really trusted. It's something you're crackpot, you know.
I guess people are used to hearing that here.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And no one's judged for it,
yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But you made some interesting comments about your time in Charleston and the conversations you were having. I was wondering if you could talk more about that residency period when you were here and
right.
How it worked for you, what kind of works you were producing, how did it inspire you or help you think about other things? Yeah,
that was I think for Hassan and myself, that was for us coming from London, that was, I don't want to speak for Hassan can speak for himself, but it was very much a life-changing event, actually. It's very much a life-changing event, certainly for me, and I'll talk about it in a moment. But it was what was really important. Again, Hassan and I had a chance to really talk about our experiences about working within contemporary art. What challenges are we finding to support ourselves, even just to bring up the conversation of spirituality in art, and especially if you're unapologetic, especially if you're saying right from the start, I'm a Buddhist making this work, I'm a Christian making this work, I'm a Muslim making this work, and that is my faith informs my artwork, informs exactly what you see. It's not sort of covered or plastered over. It's direct. You don't see much. You don't, especially in contemporary art. You do not see that type of art on walls in contemporary. You just don't. And the reason being is that, again, you brought it up. Curators, modern contemporary curators, they probably haven't even stepped in the church. Their church, their cathedrals, is the art museum. Their priests are fellow curators. Their popes are directors. That's what they are. And their gods are sponsorship. And when COVID happened, then it was almost like a reconstruction, because everyone went through that and everyone felt it, and they knew that the audience was up for listening to it. It's up to let's hear what those Christians have to say. Let's hear what those Muslims and Buddhists have to say, and these Hindus have to say now. Let's actually study what their discipline was about, because that helped them during that period. So I was missing that, and I don't know I cannot even articulate what I was missing. So maybe I should go and listen to these guys that I kind of wanted to deconstruct for a long while. Maybe they have something to say. Maybe I could pick something. I might not want to exhibit it, but at least I'll be able to listen to it now. All right. So Hassan and I were talking about this, because this is post-COVID for both of us. So we started to see there was subtle changes happening, but still that reluctance was still there. And we were discussing, how can we contribute to this discussion so we can make it more open, so it's not such a big deal talking about faith, that we can encourage dialogue, encourage questioning, encouraging kind of someone to even just not ask questions, but inquire to someone else's faith. I think that is changing. I think with what the work that the foundation in Charleston is doing is being the tip of the spear to push that dialogue forward. And when Hassan and I were here, we started to realise we were part of that tip of the spear, and there may be a way that we can encourage in our own sort of small stone in the water thing that could ripple out. How can we do that? So neither of us had the opportunity to discuss this with anyone in the UK until we came here. That was the irony of it. Lisa being Christian, Hassan being Muslim, and myself being Buddhist, we all decided to put our faith forward. We were just going to be unapologetic and talk about how it is to be unapologetic, and how do we navigate the contemporary art spaces being unapologetic. Can you do that? Is it possible? So what I went out of my way was to visit as many churches as possible and have dialogues with sanctuaries here, and ask them what their experiences of working with artists. Do they have any experiences of working with artists? They were astonished to realise that the Church of England has a liturgical law which says any art that goes into the church cannot be removed for 150 years. So because I've made 2 altarpieces in the UK, this is the reason why I was here, that are both 150 years, cannot remove them. They are intrigued to find out, well, what is the process of artists working in spaces like this? So I had a lot of discussions about that, and it was interesting to learn of the challenges that churches here face. Again, like the UK, churches have have developed a distrust of contemporary artists and contemporary art institutions. And I think there's a lot of that, I guess, in the States, because they've seen a lot of desecration going on, and so they were interested in how the Anglican Church in the UK goes out of its way to support the community within the church, but also allows the artists to have their creative license. But at the same time, how do you balance that?
So was the value of your time in FSA just being able to have a place where you felt free to explore that spirituality and have that camaraderie?
Yes,
and intellectual kind of.
Yes. I think that unfiltered discussions. There was a lot of unfiltered discussion, and that is needed, especially even more now that we can have these discussions which are completely. You're not walking on eggshells or anything. You're just explaining what's my experience. So it was great for us coming from London and being here. I thought, right, we're in a neutral space. We could have these completely unfiltered discussions now about how we are navigating these places in the UK. And it was great for the Nicia to be involved in these discussions. Because you guys, you're really going, you're taking a deep dive, and so we had these deep dive conversations, and then when we had that, we had a time at Mepkin. We all went to Mepkin, and again it was deep dive, and again it was unfiltered. And I think for artists, we don't realise how little we have these unfiltered discussions, and to have a time set aside where, you can make your art and explore, but when you're amongst your peers and you're all listening to each other, and obviously you don't know each other, but you're allowing yourselves to have these unfiltered discussions, that invariably is going to impact and inform your art that you make here, because it just you'll feel like you're free enough. You're more freer than think, wow, I can explore spirituality now. I can do it without constraint. I'm not thinking about if my gallery's going to accept it. I'm not thinking about if the museum's going to accept it. All I'm thinking about is having conversations with my peers who are also going through this journey. And you're listening to them, and it's going to inform your art here. It will. It informed mine. We were all rubbing off each other. And that's what I loved about those kind of... we always had conversations in the pool. It was always by the pool, in the hot tub, and those conversations really have helped me, especially sort of steer my inquiry through Charleston. Mm-hmm. It made me really think about, okay, now we're having these discussions, how do I make that course through Charleston? What questions do I ask? So you didn't want to be kind of in your little silo, in your little space, and I'm just going to, because we do that anyway as artists. And the whole point is to have these discussions and and actually be challenged on your own. And a lot of us, you might get challenged down the pub with your mates and stuff, but is to be challenged by your peers who are also working that path, and they're questioning you, why are you doing that? Have you thought about this? Artists don't get enough of that, really. And if you're walking this particular path of being, I'm an artist who's informed by my spirituality, you're often alone. You're often doing it alone. You're a loner. You are a Ronin, and you're walking that path alone. So when you're, have a foundation, which is such a unique space of foundation, spirituality and arts. It's unique, it's global. This would never happen in London. It just would not happen. It can only happen here. And that's something I kind of shout to the rooftops about when I'm in London. And to my friends when I say, oh, I'm in Charleston, going to this residency, and they say, Foundation for Spirituality in the Arts. Oh yeah, that's kind of obvious. Why don't we do that here?
Interesting.
But it's no. But again, we've discarded the framework. I haven't even picked up a framework. That's, I guess, that the objective for Foundation for Spirituality and the Arts is to help guide and hold the hands of people. You say it's okay. On both sides, you can hold the hands of these curators and that find it hard to talk about, or don't know where to go, where to start, but also is holding hands of sacred spaces and say you can work together. There is a common theme you can work together. That's when FSA is right in the middle. They can be that bridge builder between the two.
I mean, obviously being in Charleston at FSA was so important in so many ways, as you've just described. But then I'm wondering if you could then talk about how the residency then kind of helped this additional project.
Right. Well, this is the reason why Foundation for Spirituality and Arts is an incredible engine for this discussion. And when you're here, you're encouraged to speak to as many kind of sanctuaries as possible from different denominations, but you're also encouraged to speak to the College of Charleston, some other contemporary. You meet other contemporary artists here. There's a huge art scene in Charleston that you can tap into. So the FSA becomes a kind of almost like an agent for helping creating dialogue around the city, and it places the artist that they're working with in places where the artist is interested in. So that's what they did with me. So they realised there's a lot of churches here that would be interested to find out what that process is of making art sacred. What is that process? So FSA brokered an opportunity to speak for the conference for the South Carolina Diocese of the Episcopal Church, and I was just giving a presentation about how the process of making art sacred for sanctuary, from a Buddhist perspective, working in Christian sanctuary. So I gave them the example of St. Stephen's and St. Francis in London, these two churches. became very interested in the liturgical law. So as I was speaking, there were people in the audience who were fact checking me. They were going, that can't be true. That the Anglican Church has a liturgical law, 150 years, cannot be removed. So they started to Google it as I was speaking. And again, I was always mindful that if FSA can only happen in America, and I stress this, it can only happen in America, then there's opportunities in America for this to happen, for this to carry on. How maybe I can throw a bigger stone in the water and make a bigger ripple. I probably have more of a chance here than I will in the UK. Even though I've made works in the UK, which I'm very grateful and very proud of. There is now, I thought, there's a chance now that I'm able to encourage other artists who are not religious to even think of working in sanctuary. But how can I do that? So at this conference, when I was giving this address and they were fact checking me, it almost was it was a dovetail, like the universe just sort of dovetailed it. So I met with Calvary because I was interested in their history. It's being the oldest Black American church in Charleston, and I met Father Bailey, and we were again. FSA created this link, created the opportunity for me to go to Calvary and just meet the Father Bailey there. And I was just talking about he was just talking about my practice and why I'm there, and we were talking about FSA. And he just turned around to me and said, we need an icon, We need an icon on the back of our church, just a small one. And that's all he said. That's all he said. And then I went to the conference, and it just so happened Grace Wingfield was there, and she saw that is an opportunity where the South Carolina Diocese program going forward into the future and what I do can be aligned. So that's what I meant. It just felt it was the right time. So I gave them an idea, and I thought, while I left Charleston, I sent in a proposal to them and said, how about this as a way of working? And it was only to make just a small icon at the back of the church. So I wasn't thinking of even returning to Charleston. I thought I could make it here in London and I could send it back. But I know that I needed to, because I needed to know a little bit more about the church. And because I only knew the surface, just the very surface. I didn't know its significance in the new, but it's huge significance for Charleston and the US and South Carolina. Didn't understand it at all. So I knew I had to have a trip back. So when I came back in June of last year, then I started to, in my research again, I met up with a gentleman called Lonnie Hamilton III, and he's 96 at that time. And I don't know Lonnie Hamilton. I don't know his significance, never heard of him before. So I just saw him as someone who's 96, and I thought, I want to look like you when I'm 96. And I remember having this discussion with him about Calvary, and he said to me, I'm not the best person to speak to because I've only been here 68 years. So because I realised that, and that's an anomaly, it's a very unique for me coming from the UK, it's just for someone who's been in one church for 68 years. And then he said, there's generations here. And I realised, well, I need to do some more research. And then the project enlarged itself with the help of, again, FSA is being with the whole process as well. And then I was asked to come back again and give another presentation at the South Carolina Diocese Conference in October, November. And that's when the project actually became larger. So it became, instead of an icon at the front, it became an altarpiece, and they wanted it permanent altarpiece. And now it became, this project became an opportunity for Calvary to become a blueprint of how contemporary artists can work within churches. So we'll write down a whole method of how to do it, but we'll also document the method. And there was this creative resilience initiative has been born out of a partnership with FSA, the Calvary Icons Project, and the Episcopal Church. And it's a way to help kind of write down a framework that contemporary artists can work and support a community. They don't necessarily need to be Christian, but they need a framework so they can work within the community, but the community needs a framework so they can work with the artist. And also we create a framework if there's another body outside of, like there's an agency that wants to work with it, who has an artist who wants to work with the community. How does that agency get they all get a framework? So it's about the protection of the community. How do you protect the community, protect the artist, protect the faith, and everyone wins? How can we create an everyone wins situation? And I'm very keen to encourage young artists to see that there is an opportunity in sanctuary. It's not always the opportunities in the gallery practice or a museum practice. There's that opportunity as well. Have a look at that. But we've got to develop a framework that helps support them, so they know what is needed to deliver in a sanctuary. So that's where it's got to now, and it's very exciting to be. It's again to be that tip of that spear. Mm-hmm. And it's just to encourage a dialogue between sanctuary and contemporary art, especially contemporary artists who are not religious. I'm very keen to have those artists have the experience of working in a space. It would actually, I mean, I've had the benefit of going through this process on 2 occasions, and it's supported my faith in huge ways. I kind of don't want it. I don't want to be the only one to experience this. I really want to go out of the way to be that be that blueprint for other artists. Say, yeah, if he can do it, then yeah, and there's a framework to help me guide myself through it. Then this is a place that can create value and bring the community together.
Yeah.